Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be talking about worldviews in our continuing class on biblical ethics. What is a worldview? Well, there's a sense in which it's a window to the world. That is, it's the way you look at your world. Imagine you're sitting at a window looking out, and if you're looking through a window, you only see part of the world that's out there. You don't see the whole thing. Our view is necessarily limited by what are called our paradigms. Our paradigms, our worldview, are the glasses through which we see that world. Have you ever put on maybe some tinted glasses that had a particular tint, maybe blue or green or red, and you put those on, and the whole world suddenly looks that way? And we have a tendency to look at the world, to look at our world through our own glasses, through our own paradigm, through our own viewpoint. One of the ways that you'll see this, for example, a simple little thing, is just looking at a map of the world, but one that's presented just a bit differently. You're not used to seeing the map in this way. Usually you're used to seeing north at the top of the map and south at the bottom. Here is MacArthur's universal corrective map. He says corrective. It's not that the other is wrong. It's just looking at things slightly differently with a different perspective. Or we can take this other map. Forget who did this one. But again, it's the same world map, but it has, and it's still, maps usually have to be flat because you're trying to depict a round world. But they've spaced things differently, trying to show you a different perspective on what the world looks like. It looks very different. Here's a common picture. This has been around for a long time, so you may have seen this already. You're looking at a picture of a woman. Now, depending on how you were seeing it, and the artist has intentionally drawn it this way, where you might see a young woman who's looking away over her, over her right shoulder, looking away from you, or you're looking perhaps you see a very old woman, and she's looking down, and it's the same picture, but depending on how you see it, you might see something very different. So then a worldview, and I'm taking this from James Sire, his Universe Next Door, he says a worldview is a set of presuppositions, or we could call them assumptions, which we hold either consciously or subconsciously about the basic makeup of our world. And we all come to everything with a worldview in which we have grown up, in which we've come to see our world. Most of your worldview lies under the surface, like a giant iceberg, where maybe just a small portion of it you see, and most of it is under the surface, not immediately obvious to you. In fact, you're probably unaware of your own worldview. You just think that's the way everyone ought to see things. Now, what a worldview does, it determines how the events and circumstances of your life will be understood, how they will be accepted, and how you're going to act upon them. And so I think it's important, especially for a Christian, to examine and evaluate your worldview and make sure it really is a Christian worldview. Or have you come and brought your baggage from your previous worldview into your Christianity? How important are religious beliefs to one's worldview? Paul Hebert, a missionary anthropologist, says theology is not simply a system of beliefs to be added alongside the others. Theology is the master blueprint upon which all other blueprints are mapped. That is, we need to come and look at our worldview in light of the Scriptures and let the Scriptures tell us what that worldview ought to be. And so, for this purpose, we're going to look at a number of different worldviews. Very quick survey. Naturalism, Sire refers to this as the silence of finite space. Carl Sagan and Darwin and others have been part of that. Secular humanism is a source of the worldview of naturalism. It sees God as being removed. It can be either atheistic or like Darwin, who was an agnostic. But God is removed from that worldview, and it sees the universe as self-activating. The universe just happened on its own. And human personality then is seen only as a interrelation of chemical properties. We're just a bunch of atoms that got together, and it happened. And so really, anything that we say about right or wrong is really up to us to determine. There's no outside influence on that. And values are merely that which we have chosen to utilize. Values are just man-made. Now, B.F. Skinner, the father of nihilism, Sire describes this as 0 point. He comes at it with extreme pessimism. He's extremely pessimistic, with skepticism. He says, nothing has meaning, value, significance, dignity, or worth except what you try to place in those. And so he speaks about the absence of dignity, the absence of value. Human animals, and he classifies humans as just a different form of animal, only invent values. There is no right or wrong. It's just what we have decided it to be. Sartre takes that a step beyond, and so Sartre describes this as beyond nihilism. He says, humanity is central. People make themselves who they are. We are who we've made ourselves. We are who we want to be. Knowledge, therefore, is seen as subjective, and history is, first of all, it's uncertain. Who knows what really happened? It's just a trick that we play on the survivors, and really it's not even important. If history is just a series of chance happenings, then it has no significance. It has no importance at all. And the supernatural, well, we can just forget about that. So therefore, Sartre says there's no absolute moral values. There is no real right or wrong. It's only what we've decided it to be. Existentialism, then, can be either atheistic, but there is also a theistic form of existentialism that sees God is there, and yet I'm just trying to make the most of things. So existentialism, that's just the next step beyond nihilism. Tillich is a good representative of that. He says even the theistic version of existentialism says that the Bible, though religiously true, is historically untrustworthy. So yes, you might take the Bible and use it to guide your life, but that's just your decision because there's no historical truth to the Bible itself. Now, another worldview is seen in Eastern pantheism that says many, well, maybe not all, but many roads lead to that one truth because, after all, everything is God. God is in everything, and He's everywhere, and He is everything. Ideas, therefore, aren't really important because that's just part of the bigness of all things. Time isn't real, and history is cyclical. Not all pantheism says this, but Eastern pantheism does. Where you are today is where we started off, way back when, and we're just going to keep going around in circles. And the desire to enter the undifferentiated one, in one sense, we could say that each person is God. You are God, and I am God, and we're just part of that big Godness. The American version of that has been in the New Age with its prophetess Shirley MacLaine. Sees core experiences. What we try to do is we try to experience that cosmic consciousness. We try to experience the universe as if you can really experience that. It denies any personal God. There's only a mysterious force. That's where Lucas gets it in Star Wars. There's no Lord of the universe unless you're it. You can sort of vote for yourself and you can be your own God. And it borrows heavily from animism, in which we are connected to all living creatures, and therefore, we're all one. We are the world. George Lucas popularized this with his Star Wars, Yoda saying, "May the Force be with you." But then in the sequels, he talks about the will of the Force. So he actually wants to personalize the Force, and the Force wanting to decide certain things. Sort of taking pantheism off onto a tangent. Postmodernism, whether it's around to stay or whether it was just a flash in the pan, Sartre calls this the vanished horizon, says all stories are equally valid. It doesn't matter what you believe. You believe your thing, I'll believe my thing, and they're all essentially not the same, but they're all equally valid. That reality is forever hidden, and any story but my own is oppressive, so you keep your story to myself, I'll keep my story to myself, and we'll go our happy way. That the social good, and remember this is a class on ethics, is whatever society takes it to be at the moment. So if we all decide that we're going to go this way, then that becomes the good, that becomes the ethical, and ethics changes, well, with whatever society wants to do. Postmodernism stares blankly at any claims to the truth and says, well, hey, if that works for you, if that's your truth, as long as it works for you, you do your thing, I'll do my thing. Don't tell me about your thing. I'm too interested in my thing. And there are many different kinds of truths. And Nietzsche would point out, well, consequently, there's no truth. If there's many different kinds of truth, then truth doesn't really exist. And so he reasoned, well, truth and absolutes and God, that's all just dead. Instead of truth shall make you free, the postmodern claims that freedom shall make you true, which is a denial of both freedom and truth. Here in our little comic from the Tampa Tribune, notice your way can go either way. There is no right way, there's no wrong way. Just whichever way you want to go, you do that way. Now, deism, and this isn't Christianity, deism is the belief that God started it all. Sartre referred to this as the clockwork universe. Voltaire and Einstein were both deists. So there is a God, but he is distant, he's not personal. He might be an intellect to be recognized, but not a person to be worshipped. And so God is seen as an architect, not a lover, not a judge. He can be a force, he can be that greater one, but he's not personal. And so the cosmos then is neither fallen nor abnormal, it just is. Now, the cosmos in deism, then, is a closed, linear cause and effect system, because you have a God who started it all, but then he has wandered away, and he's not involved in our story. A clockwork universe that God has allowed to run on its own. He is the grand clockmaker, but having done that, he has gone about his own business, and that does not concern us. And so God, as the first cause, only did that first cause, but never intervenes. And that means that miracles don't happen. It means that prayer doesn't do anything at all, except it's just an exercise in your own fertility. And it means, with regard to ethics, just go do what you want, because God's not involved. Now, Christian theism, instead, sees the world as a world that's charged with the grandeur of God. I'm using Sartre here. And he would say that knowledge and death and reality, and yes, ethics, that's the part of our story we're going to be looking at, and history, which includes the history of ethics, but the history of everything else, and the realness of human beings are all focused upon God. That God is the source and the foundation for our ethics. And so we have in the Christian story, we have law, and I don't mean just the Ten Commandments. I mean, I'm going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where God said, "Do this or don't do this. Don't eat from the tree of that. Don't eat from the tree of that tree that's in the middle of the garden." And then there has been sin as a result of that, where we have chosen against the command of God, both in the garden and later on in the law. And in fact, that's our regular story. We live in a broken world in which sin, that is, doing our own thing apart from God, takes place. But the rest of the story is that God has responded in love through the cross. And he has reached out to us, and he has called us to himself. And that will be the basis of our Christian ethic.